Hi guys, so in this video I want to show you how to create a modal window using the popular web application framework Angular.js. So basically what I'm talking about is just a modal window. So this is a demonstration. So if we click on this button that says show projects, we can see a projects list modal opens up. This is just some dummy data, it's not anything significant. And if we close, then the modal closes. If we click on something in the background, the modal also closes. So I will show you how to build this simple application using Angular.js now. So first thing we need to do is go to a coding IDE. I highly recommend using VS Code, which is what I'll be using. And now we need to create a terminal instance inside your folder coding workspace. Once you have created your terminal instance, you need to use the ng-new command to create a new project. So we'll call it modal tutorial. So ng-new modal tutorial creates a new Angular project named modal tutorial. It's installing the packages. So while this is being installed, let's add this newly created Angular project to our workspace. You can see tutorial add. I think we're running into some. Okay, so modal tutorial. Yep. Okay, so as you can see, this is the Angular project structure for the newly created modal tutorial Angular application. We can see the README file here, the package.json with all its dependencies. We will have to add the Angular material library later on, which I will show how to do, and Angular.json file. We have the source folder app component with the main default component being the app component, and we have the module.ts file. So we'll have to add some I will have to add some stuff into the app module.ts file, and we'll have to do some. We'll also have to create a modal component. So what we'll do is we'll create a modal component, and in that component we will add the content that will be contained in this modal. So for example, all this content will be added to this modal component. So instead of me just explaining, let's get into it. So while this instance is still installing npm packages, let's speed things up and get started on adding the Angular material library to our project. So to do that, we use the ng-add Angular material command. Give it a second. Would you like to share anonymous data? Sure. And now Angular material will show a prompt. The first will be to select a theme. It's not really important what you choose, so I'll choose the first default. Set up global Angular material topography styles. Sure, it's not really important here. Now this one is important. So browser animations for Angular material, you want to make sure you select Y for yes. So please select yes. So installing packages. Now let's go over to the first terminal tab. You can see that our Angular project and all its dependencies have been successfully installed. So while we're waiting for the Angular material library to install, we can get started on creating the project's modal component. We do that by running the command ng-generate component and let's give it the name projects modal. Oh, my bad. So this error was given because we're currently in the parent workspace directory. We're not in the actual Angular project. So now we cd into our actual Angular project, then we run our command. Angular looks for the Angular.json file to create the modal, the components. So once we cd'd into this directory, it was able to find the Angular.json file. So now you can see this folder in green, meaning it was newly created. This is the component that will hold the code for our modal content. So let's add, before we add content to here, we need to go to app.module.cs and we need to add some stuff. So let me go over to my blog to make this quicker. So we need to add the following code. Okay. App routing module, so this is mentioned twice. And app component projects module we need to take out. And what we need to do is we need to add imports browser animations module, MAT button module, and MAT dialog module. So we need to add these three Angular libraries into our imports array. We also need the entry components array to hold the projects modal component. This is because the entry components section is used to define any component that is not contained, that is not found in the HTML. Because a project's modal component does fall into this category, it's best to add this component into a components array. And yeah, everything looks good here. Yeah, so we can save this. Now we can work on adding our app.component code. So this currently is the default page that Angular shows for its app.component.html file. We can get rid of it by pressing Control A, delete, and we'll start over by saying show projects button folder button mat raised button ID show projects button, and we need a click event listener, and we'll give it the function open, a method open module show project. So basically what this code does is it creates a main tag containing a button HTML element. We give it the mat raised button attribute to signify that this is not a normal HTML element, but rather a Angular material element. And we give it the click listener open modal. So basically whenever it's clicked, it calls this method, which will be added in our app.component.ts file right now. So now let's go over to our app.ts.component file. We need to do some imports first, so let's do them. So app.dialog module, app mat.dialog. So this is mat.dialog config, mat.dialog, mat.dialog, mat.dialog ref from Angular material dialog. Okay, and then we import projects modal component from projects modal component. Now once we have this done, we can delete the default title variable and add the required content. So let's get started. So dialog config is mat dialog config modal dialog is a mat dialog ref projects modal component any undefined constructor public mat dialog, and then we say this ng after view init void. Let me just type this out and I will explain all this code after I'm done. And then we have our modal, open modal, this dot dialog config id projects modal component, this dot copy height width and this dot modal dialog, this dot mat dialog projects modal component, this dot dialog config. Okay, so now let's go over what this code means. So modal dialog config and modal dialog are basically two. So this is fresh a service, and this is a mat dialog config object. And basically, what they do is they allow us to display the modal component on the main window. In the constructor, we can see we inject the mat dialog object with the mat dialog service. The ng after view init method is used to close the modal window when it is opened if the user clicks anything other than the modal window. So let me demonstrate this functionality. So when we open the modal, we have the modal displayed, and if the user clicks anywhere other than the modal itself, it's the ng after view init method's job to close this modal window. You might be wondering why this question mark is here. It's because when we declare and instantiate modal dialog object over here, it may or may not be defined, which is why we have this pipe character signifying it could be undefined or it could be a actual mat dialog reference object. So that's why we need to include this character optional parameter. In the modal open modal method, what we basically do is we give the dialog config object in an ID projects modal component, and we give it a width and a height, and then we open the dialog config object using the MAT dialog service dot open method, and we assign that open modal to the modal dialog so that we can close it if the user clicks on anything else other than the modal. So dialog config will be injected into project's modal component, and let's move on now. So application component is now done. We can move on to project's modal component, and let me just get the code for it. So we're going to add this code to the project's modal component.html file. Basically, everything you see here is basically what's on that file. Projects list, you have a unordered list and a close button. When this close button is pressed, we call the close modal method. It is not yet implemented in the close modal component.ts file, so we would have to implement it first. So let's do that. So we would need private. Let me just look at how to do this. So now we need this service to be injected to the dialog ref object, and we have to import mat dialog ref from Angular material dialog. So we import this, and then we say this dot dialog ref dot close, basically to close it. Pretty simple. So now we have to add the styles for the projects.modal component.css file. We'll do that by going over to my blog post and taking this CSS styles and pasting. This is pretty self-explanatory. So basically, modal content wrapper is this main div. Modal title, modal footer, modal close button. You have a red background color. Pretty basic stuff. So let's go to the CSS global file. So in Angular projects, the global CSS file is always called styles.css, and we will have to add some styles to it, namely the MAT dialog container projects modal component style, which styles the entire modal. So you might be wondering why I have this projects modal component style in the CSS in the styles.css file instead of the projects modal component.css file, because it would make more sense to keep it more specific, right, by including this in the actual projects modal. But it doesn't really work that way, because the MAT dialog container, this modal object is created in the app.component.ts component and not in the project's modal component. So if we were to use this style in our project's modal component.css file, it wouldn't work, because project's modal component is just a component that holds the contents of the modal and not the actual modal itself. The actual modal is actually created in app.components, which is why we have to add this style to the global CSS file. Okay, so now that that's done, we can see what we have left here. And yeah, that should be all. So let's try running it. JSON. See if this works. And by the way, whenever we're developing, we always run into a lot of errors, so it's very important to stay mindful of those errors and not get frustrated when we encounter these errors. We have to think rationally about these errors and not spend too much time getting stuck on these errors. And hopefully this command does not give an error. So it's just generating browser application bundles for now. And it's compiling all the Angular libraries now. So while this loads, let me just point you to my blog post that I've written on my website. Let me update this. So this is my, let me show my actual domain name. So this is my website, codinginformer.com. So just go to codinginformer.com, and it's the article titled How to Display a Modal in Angular 10. And you will find the full guide along with the GitHub source code link for this code. If you ever get stuck, you can look through my source code and see where you're coming up short in your application. Okay, so it's still loading. Okay, so compiled successfully, but still need to wait. Okay, compiled successfully. Now let's go to localhost 4200, and now we see our projects, show projects button. If we click on it, we have our projects list modal opening up. If we click close, it closes, and we click on the background, it also closes in all different directions. So in conclusion, that's how to build a modal in Angular. So I really hope that this video really helped you guys. Thanks so much for watching to the end, if you're still here. And yeah, I really hope this helped you. Please feel free to subscribe to my channel. It really helps a lot. Like my videos, share them, visit my blog posts, read them, and yeah, check me out on LinkedIn, Stack Overflow, and yeah. So thank you for watching, guys. Have a great day, and keep on coding and keep on learning. Bye.